Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Robin Wilson, Director of the Institute for Government and Public Affairs for the University of Illinois System. On behalf of the system and our universities in Urbana-Champaign, Chicago, and Springfield, I welcome you to this educational discussion featuring our 2022 Douglas Awardee, retired Ambassador Marie Yovanovitch. I'd like to thank the ambassador for making this trip to the University of Illinois, in part for our 75th Jubilee anniversary, so we very much appreciate this. I want to welcome all of you who are here joining us virtually. Thank you to President Killeen, to Senator Durbin, to the Executive Vice President for Academic Affairs, Avijit Ghosh, especially to the Douglas family who are attending virtually: Jean Bandler, Ned Bandler, John Bandler, Peter Douglas, Kate Douglas-Torrey, Christine Douglas-Tansey, and Caleb Tansey. Chancellor Jones, Chief of Staff Chris Spann, Rep. Amons, and Senator Hunter, thank you all. I also want to appreciate and recognize our Board of Trustees members attending, members Chilling, Puente, and Hawk, and all of the friends and colleagues of IGPA who are in attendance. I'd also like to thank Jason Mazzoni, Brian Gaines, and Gretchen Winter, and Alyssa Cooper for thinking through this educational opportunity with me, and for the whole IGPA team for making this day possible. For those guests who are new to IGPA, I'll just say a quick word. The Institute of Government and Public Affairs is the place where world-class research and policy meet. We help connect the scholarship of our universities with the decision makers in Springfield, Washington, D.C., and beyond. The people of Illinois have made a great investment in the University of Illinois system, and IGPA helps to return that investment by serving as the people's policy think tank and supporting evidence-based policy decision-making that can improve people's lives. Our partnerships with ethical, dedicated public servants are at the core of that mission. So it is fitting that IGPA has been the home to the Douglas Award for the 30 years since it's been created in 1992. Before introducing President Killeen, let me tell you that he will be followed by a short video from Illinois Senior Senator Dick Durbin. Senator Durbin, as you know, is a great friend to the University of Illinois system and to the Douglas Award. After interning for Senator Douglas while a student at Georgetown University, Senator Durbin went on to a distinguished career himself in the House of Representatives and later the U.S. Senate, where he has served since 1997. Now it's my pleasure to introduce you to the 20th President of the University of Illinois System, President Tim Killeen. Tim took office in May 2015 and has led a wave of growth for the flagship university system, and I'm sure you all know this. So without further ado, I will introduce President Killeen. Thank you.
Thank you for that welcome, Robin, and thank you for everything you do in leadership of the Institute and all colleagues here as well. And thanks as well to Senator Durbin, who always takes time to share with us, and he'll be sharing the message you'll soon hear, and for everything he does for the country, for the state of Illinois. I'm honored to welcome Ambassador Yovanovitch, once an ambassador, always an ambassador to Illinois and to the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. We're just thrilled and delighted that you're joining us today after receiving this year's Paul H. Douglas Award for Ethics in Government in April in the nation's capital. Congratulations again on this richly deserved honor, Ambassador, and we're looking forward to the comments and the educational opportunity that's here today. Being part of the Douglas Award presentation every year, for me, is a genuine privilege every year as president, but the presentation is just one component. I think we learn from this process every year. The real educational benefit, as well as an opportunity for our students, a number of whom are here with us today, which is always wonderful, to learn from and connect with public servants such as Ambassador Yovanovitch, whose dedication to ethical public service and to sacrifice in the name of the higher cause of our country should serve as a light to us all, particularly in these times. Senator Douglas was the model of this kind of public service, and the award was created 30 years ago, 1992 as mentioned, to honor him and extend that and his legacy. Senator Douglas was a Chicago alderman known for his commitment to reform, and he was also a U.S. Marine who fought in the Pacific during World War II in his 50s. And he was wounded in battle at an age where very few would volunteer to serve at all. He was sworn in as a senator in 1949 and served almost 2 decades. He was known, of course, as you know, as the conscience of the Senate, and set standards that should guide all public servants. Senator Douglas's unyielding commitment to service, sacrifice, and above all, ethical behavior in the name of safeguarding democracy could not be more relevant at any time than it is today, in this time of tumult and challenge, as you all know. I'm really delighted to also welcome the number of members of the Douglas family who have joined us virtually. It's quite a long list. Hello, everybody. Thanks for being here. And I remain grateful to them for their partnership, this abiding partnership with the University of Illinois system that means so much to us in celebrating Senator Douglas and his legacy. Thank you as well to State Senator Matty Hunter and State Representative Carol Ammons for joining us virtually, and to the 3 members of our own Board of Trustees who I don't see in the room, so I think they're on the virtual connection. Thank you all for taking the time to join us. I want to extend my gratitude to Robin and IGPA for stewarding the Douglas Award. It's a very significant role. As mentioned, this is the 75th anniversary of IGPA, and it has quite a legacy of its own. And I'm sure some of you have noticed a certain acceleration in the last few years under the new directorship and the new system. It was created to provide our state and federal lawmakers and with their staff with objective, evidence-based research to help shape sound science and public policy. And that is working. It's working today effectively. And I know firsthand in talking to the state legislators and the governor's office how important it is in terms of informing policy in Illinois. For 7.5 decades now, IGPA has provided that vital link between the experts, and we love our experts. We've got them on every field and every discipline you could think of, here in Urbana-Champaign, in Chicago, and Springfield, and of course the public servants that we all rely on. I welcomed 40 new state representatives just a couple of weeks ago, and so many of them are alumni that were kind of have the biggest caucus. And so it's not just influential, it's politically relevant, which is important, as you all know. So to Robin, her staff, and the many people who have made IGPA so important over the years, I'm honored to be part of your Jubilee anniversary. And again, Ambassador, I'm so thrilled to have you here with us.
Senator Durbin here. Delighted to congratulate Ambassador Marie Yovanovitch, the recipient of the Paul H. Douglas Award for Ethics in Government from the University of Illinois. My mentor, Senator Douglas, believed public service is one of the most noble callings. He was living proof of this through his service as an alderman in the city of Chicago, a United States Marine, and a United States Senator. He also believed that freedom and human dignity were worth the sacrifice, even if he had to stand alone. And like Senator Douglas, Ambassador Yovanovitch has made countless sacrifices to stand boldly in the fight to preserve democracy. In an era that glamorized a career on Wall Street, she decided to opt for a career in the Foreign Service. From her first posting in Mogadishu, she dealt with corruption, crime, discrimination on a daily basis. But her perseverance and belief in what is right and wrong set the high ethical standard for the career that followed. In many ways, we see the fruits of her hard work in Ukraine today. The bravery and determination of the Ukrainian people for a free and democratic country serve as an inspiration to all of us. I'm happy that students and scholars at the University of Illinois will have the opportunity today to meet the ambassador, as well as family members of Senator Douglas, including Jean and Ned Bandler. Senator Douglas inspired so many people to lead lives dedicated to serving the public good with the highest integrity. I'm certain the ambassador's time will do the same for the next generation of leaders.
Thank you, President Kleen and Senator Durbin, for both of your remarks. So I'd like now to warmly welcome our guest of honor, Ambassador Yovanovitch, who will be joined by Professor Gretchen Winder, who will lead what I think will be a riveting discussion. So may I ask that you join us up front? Just a very quick introduction for each. You know well that Ambassador Yovanovitch is the retired ambassador to Ukraine, but also Armenia, and Kyrgyzstan, in addition to other senior government positions during her 33-year diplomatic career. She retired from the State Department in 2020 and is a senior fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace and a non-resident fellow at Georgetown University. She's received numerous awards, including the Presidential Distinguished Service Award twice, the Secretary's Diplomacy for Freedom Award, the Trainer Award for Excellence in Conduct of Diplomacy, the PEN Benenson Courage Award, and of course our very own Paul H. Douglas Award for Ethics in Government. Ambassador Yovanovitch served as the Dean of the Language School of the Foreign Service Institute, as well as the International Advisor and Deputy Commandant at the Eisenhower School for National Service, Security, and Research Strategy at the National Defense University, where she also taught national security strategy. So it's no surprise as an educator that she accepted our invitation to join us here and speak to our university community and especially our students. Gretchen Winter is with the Geese College of Business, and she serves on our Douglas Selection Committee. She'll be guiding this discussion. Professor Winter does double duty, triple duty everywhere, teaching at the Business School, the College of Law, for which we're very grateful, Professional Responsibility, and at the Granger College of Engineering. And I'm absolutely delighted that she could be the one leading this discussion, since she has specialized in building and implementing effective organizational ethics and compliance programs through her long career. So Professor Winter, over to you.
Thank you very much, Robin. It's an honor and a privilege to be here with you today, Ambassador Yovanovitch. We are thrilled to have you, and I can't wait to hear your answers to some of the questions that have been submitted to us. So let's begin. As you know, you have been involved in the Foreign Service for 33 years, an amazing diplomatic career, working in a number of emerging democracies. So tell us a little bit about how you got started in this line of work. What inspired you to take on these particular kinds of challenges?
So, as some of you may know, my parents were refugees. They grew up in Europe during World War II, and those were searing experiences. And of course, they transmitted, some of that to me as a child, as parents do. But the most important thing, perhaps, that they transmitted to me was how lucky we were to be living in the United States, in a democracy, in a free market economy. Didn't mean that things were easy for our family, especially in the early years, but they were able to worship as they pleased. They were able to say what they wanted, and they really appreciated the rights and privileges that every American citizen and every guest to America has. And they kind of instilled in my brother and I that it's important to appreciate it, but it's also important to give back. In whatever way we wanted to, in whatever way we could. And so, over the years, that kind of stayed with me. I went to Princeton University, and the motto of the school at the time was Princeton in the Nation's Service. And from, the first day to the last day, that was instilled in us all the time. And, that kind of stuck with me. I think that sort of acculturation, if you will, that we were privileged to be at Princeton, and I certainly was. I was there on almost a full ride, and we owed something back. And I took a couple detours along the way, as one does. And I'm all in favor of detours, because you learn in those detours as much as you do in other areas of your life.
That's an important message for students, I think. You don't just jump from Princeton to the Foreign Service. There may be some things you do beforehand.
Yeah, and you are going to take those experiences along with you into the Foreign Service, for example. It's all useful and grist for the mill. But I did make a number of detours. But in the end, I wanted to combine my passion for history, for foreign policy, for politics, for travel, with that need that I had to give back in some way and serve the American people. And I heard about the Foreign Service, and here is a career track where you get to do policy work, you get to go overseas, you get to travel, you get to meet the people, live with the people, learn their cultures, their language, eat the food, and you get paid for it. And so this seemed like a really good gig. and you get to have an impact. And so I joined the Foreign Service. And I didn't know which way my career was going to turn out. Interestingly, in the beginning, so this was during the Cold War. I joined in the prehistory of 1986. Some of you may remember that year. And I was told by the security people that I would never serve in what was then the Soviet Union. We had, relatives that were living in Moscow, and ties were too close, et cetera, although we were not in touch with them. And I was like, that's fine, because I was about adventure and, seeing new places and new things. And my first tour was in Mogadishu, Somalia. So that was an adventure, and it was new people and new things, that's for sure. But then, then there was Glasnost and Perestroika under Gorbachev. The Soviet Union started to open up a little bit. And when I was in London, my next post, I was called into my boss's office to say, we need you to go to Moscow as soon as possible to work in the consular section. When can you go? Can you go, I think it was a Thursday or Friday. Can you be there by Monday? And I was, the good girl, the rules-abiding girl, and I said, oh, no, you don't understand. The security people told me I was never going to serve in the Soviet Union. And he laughed, and he said, that was then. This is now. It's the needs of the service. So you're going to Moscow. So I went to Moscow for a month. I think it was in '88, and then I really, got the bug, because it felt to me like a lot was happening in the Soviet Union. That there was a lot of ferment. I didn't predict, what was going to happen in '91. But it felt like the center of the universe, and I wanted to be a part of that, and I wanted to be working in the political section. And so fast forward to 1993, and I was in Moscow working in the political section. Almost immediately there was the standoff between Yeltsin and the parliament, which ended in violence, and the embassy and the ambassador's residence were right in the line of fire. And so that was sobering, but also a very exciting time. And again, seeing the changes in Russia and what we were doing. And so I really got the bug and served in many of the former republics, now independent countries. And most of these countries, not all of them, I don't think Turkmenistan was on this list, came to us, came to the Europeans, and asked for help in transitioning from communism, from a command economy, to democracy, to a market economy. I don't think that the leaders really knew what that was about, although there were reformers in every country who maybe had studied some of these things and maybe knew a bit more about it. The leadership was the inherited leadership, right, from the Soviet Union. And, but they talked the talk, and they said they wanted to walk the walk. And so we, Europe, the international institutions, we wanted to help. And so we did. And that was, we can get into the details of that, but that was the beginning of what I thought was really important work. And when I say that the international community helped, what I want to also stress is that each of these countries had the agency to make those changes or not, to what degree they made them or not. And I think that's a really important thing for us to remember as Americans, that when we work in countries overseas, when we have various programs and so forth, we have to understand where the country is, what is possible. We have to be humble about what we know about that country and how we approach these things. And that at the end of the day, even with millions, sometimes billions of dollars, even with all the goodwill in the world from the US and from other countries, the country itself, the people of that country, the leadership of that country, they are going to be the most determinative forces for change or not. And so, but I thought that this was interesting work. I thought it was important work. And I thought that even if sometimes you can't make, that big transformative change towards democracy, you can start planting the seeds, and you can do that, individual by individual, sometimes through what we call soft power, which is exchanges. Bringing people to the United States or some other place, showing them our country, showing them how large our country is, how different it is in Illinois from New York to California, explaining our system, and sometimes they were political exchanges, but most often they were not. They were business people who were interested in, hearing about accounting, a Western style of accounting, or various other things. And through that you make friends, you certainly increase familiarity, and it is a slow process, but I think it is the best process for creating friends and allies for the United States. And often we are an impatient people. We want change tomorrow, on the next election cycle, so that we can campaign on it, whatever it might be. And these kinds of changes, they take time. But one of the things that that I would share with you is that when we think about building a new weapon system, take the F-35 for example, that is billions of dollars, and I don't know how many years it's been in development. They're now flying, but it is still decades later being perfected and changed and modified and things being fixed. And we're okay with that. We're okay with decades of development for a weapon system and billions of dollars of investment. And I'm okay with it too. We need a strong military in the United States. But we also need the other part of it. And millions and a lot of time for young leaders to become president, prime minister, speaker of the House. That is also a good investment in friendships and alliances for the United States of America.
Thank you for that comprehensive answer. And I'm going to just say, if there is more you want to learn, there is a wonderful book called Lessons from the Edge, and it is really a page turner when it comes to providing background information on the kinds of things that you've begun to talk with us about today.
Thank you.
So thank you for
very
that.
much.
I want to talk a little bit about ethics and professional responsibility and decision making. When I teach this in my classes, I teach a decision making framework. I talk to students about the importance of building and exercising their professional responsibility muscle over time, because for sure they're going to be needing that at various points in their careers when they confront challenging ethical situations. I know that you care a lot about integrity in action. You have the Paul Douglas Award as evidence, at least in part of that. Can you talk to us a little bit about the kinds of integrity-based challenges, large and small, that you have faced in your career?
Yeah. So I really think that integrity needs to be the centerpiece for all of us in our professional work. We all, whether we're students and we're faced with challenges about, cheating or not cheating, or sharing work, not sharing work, whether we're professors who discover something, and what do you do with this promising student who, had an ethical lapse, whether, in my line of work, whether we're faced with, various challenges. I think ethics and integrity needs to be at the center of our work and everything that we do. And when I say that, I don't mean to imply that I'm somehow perfect, because I got this award, as grateful as I am to you and to the Douglas Bandler family, but because I think we need to keep on reminding ourselves, when we make mistakes, we need to fix them, and we need to keep on going and ride that horse again. And we need to be an example, not hopefully in a cloying and nasty way, but in a way that is empathetic and understands that there is, there are challenges everywhere, and there isn't always a right answer. Sometimes in our ethical, challenges, there is, we wish that there was the obvious right answer and the obvious, wrong answer, and that we can just go that obvious right way. That is often not the case, and you have to choose the least bad way, and you try to manage those challenges. But one of the things, as I, kind of moved up in the State Department, it became very clear to me that it was really important for leaders to model ethical behavior. Because if you don't send that signal out by your own behavior, because everybody is watching, and certainly in embassies, which are small communities of not only Americans but locals who are watching what you're doing, how you're doing it. If you're cutting corners, if you're accepting gifts that are, nobody is going to, sell out the United States for a lovely bowl that's worth, $500. But it's against the rules. And if you accept that bowl, you're sending a signal to everybody in the embassy, I mean, just using the embassy as an example, that they can do it too, right? Because the ambassador's, taking the $500 bowl. And believe me, the host country nationals or the business person that gave you that bowl, they will try with a $1,000 bowl. Yeah. I mean, it keeps on going. And then you're in a bit of a rut. And how do you escape that? And so, again, not to be the cloying person, but I would say, rules are our friends. There's a reason that there is a limit on the amount that we can, the valuation of a gift. There's a reason for that, and we're just going to stick with it. And we're going to have a process for the gifts, and we're going to record them, and we're going to go record the disposition. And a lot of the gifts, remain at your embassies because, you can't accept them.
They're not personal gifts.
They're not personal gifts. They're given to you because of the position you occupy. Right now, I'm not getting any of those kinds of gifts. Just saying, and I'm a little hurt. Sometimes. Yeah. But the U.S. government also, if you really like a gift, and in my case, it was sometimes I really didn't want to disappoint the gift giver, I would buy the gift. Or there are ways of keeping the gift, but buying it is the most common way. So there are rules, and you should follow them, because when you have that really bigger challenge of somebody coming to you and saying, I need you to do X, and you can't do that, but you've already taken stuff on the side, and they're making it worth your while to make the wrong decision in this bigger issue that is going to hurt people, or your country's interests, you're over a barrel because they own you. And again, the rules are our friends, and kind of try to stick with them. One of the really visible examples is that when you're in many places in the world, the national air carrier will upgrade you for and you're flying hours and hours and hours and hours and hours back to the United States, and I found it really hard to turn down that upgrade because you're sitting there in steerage, and it would be much nicer to be able to sleep in business class or first class. But I also found that people noticed that I would turn it down, because the air carrier doesn't just stop with at the counter, then they come back to you and say, oh, wouldn't you like to go up front? And the answer is yes, I would like to go up front. But the answer has to be no, I can't go up front. And people notice that. And I will tell you that American businessmen were proud of that. They were proud that the American ambassador was saying no to something that clearly would have been, very nice to accept. And, they didn't let that stop them. They would come back, they were all up front. They would come back and, sit in the seat next to me and do their business with me. And then the next one would come back. So it still worked. but they were all cramped in there with me. And so I'm making a little bit of a joke. But I think that we cannot, as leaders, we cannot expect our staff or others to do the right thing if we're not doing it ourselves. I mean, there's just no expectation. You need to have the other expectation. And when people do the wrong thing, there need to be consequences. That, this is not the way we do business at the U.S. Embassy or whatever your place of business is.
Yeah, consequences can be an important way of sending this signal that you were talking about, I think. Now, in presenting the Douglas Award, the Douglas family reminded us that integrity, which we've been talking about, transparency, and steadfast devotion to the common good were the hallmarks of Senator Douglas's conduct and career. Yeah. And certainly Senator Durbin reminded us of a similar thing in his remarks just a few moments ago. Those ideas, integrity, which we've talked about, and then transparency and devotion to the common good, are things that I think you've talked about in terms of your career. We have students, some in the room today, who aspire to a career in public service. So what message do you have for them about these ideas and how they can begin to live up to them today and implement them in a career?
Yeah. So I'm not sure exactly how to do that when one is a student, but the challenges that you are facing right now, try to think about, what's right, what's wrong, and try to always, or at least mostly, go to the right side. And again, some of the issues that you face may not be clearly black and white. And then, what I did early in my career and even as ambassador is, who do I respect? And I wasn't always able to reach out to them because we were in different countries. There wasn't a secure phone to talk about this sensitive issue. But trying to think about what would that person do in this situation, and how do I do that? And I think even as a student, one with presumably less responsibility, one can do that and learn along the way. And I think that what you'll find is that, there may be some people who don't agree with that and think, you're kind of a stick in the mud and, they're doing fun things and you're not, and all of that. But the friends that have staying power are going to stick with you, and you're going to become a leader because they're going to follow your lead. And I think that's pretty critically important in terms of, not only how you want your path in life to go on, but how we want our institutions and our country to go on. We want it to go in that way, not in the cutting the corners and not doing the right thing sort of a way. And as sometimes the temptations and the challenges get bigger, sometimes these things get harder unless you've had some practice at saying no and at navigating, the grays, because we all wish we lived in a white and black kind of a world, but we don't. And so how do you navigate? And I think you'll find that if you've built a reputation as somebody who mostly does the right thing, or certainly tries to do the right thing, if you make a mistake, you will have some leeway to make that mistake because people will know that you did it in good faith, right? So I think that's pretty critically important. And I have like two little tests that are sort of not very sophisticated ones. But when I had a challenge, I would ask myself whether, if this was on the front page of the New York Times, would I be able to live with that? And the other one, again, not a very sophisticated test, but if you can't explain this to a neighbor, who's not a diplomacy expert, to a neighbor or your grandmother as to why you're doing this, maybe you need to try another tack. And then in one of the most important challenges that I faced, whether I should testify in the impeachment or not, one of the things, as I was thinking about this, because I was being ordered by the State Department and by the White House not to appear. And as I told you, I'm kind of a rules-abiding girl. My whole career I had done, what the State Department wanted, and this was not anything I ever would have imagined. But, I looked myself in the mirror and I thought, if I don't testify, can I live with myself? And I think that's an important thing. I mean, if you look yourself in the mirror and you're making a decision that will make you embarrassed in front of yourself, embarrassed in front of your children and your friends, that's a pretty clear indicator that you should do, the opposite.
So I love those three tests: the grandmother test, the mirror test, the New York Times test. I teach those to my students.
No kidding.
Too. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's a way to examine whether the course that you have mapped out for yourself is one that you will be able to effectively implement.
Right.
And I think working through a process that begins with understanding the issues, looking at the relevant rules and trying to understand how they apply, figuring out what resources you have to help you think through a situation, then developing a set of options, and there are always more options than yes or no, as I think you've pointed out, and then trying to test those options against those, what you call 3 simple tests, which are actually pretty effective, really does, I think, make a difference as you try to figure out what course of action to take. You mentioned resources, people that you might reach out to, and how difficult it was reaching out to some
Sometimes,
of them
yeah.
when you couldn't get to them. But this notion of mentorship, I'd love to have you talk about a little bit too. So as you think about people who can help you figure things out, did you have mentors? Were they helpful to you
Yeah.
in some of these tough situations?
So the short answer is yes, but when I joined the Foreign Service, that was a long time ago, and we didn't talk about mentors. I mean, maybe in other industries or walks of life, people talked about mentors and mentorship and what that all meant, but we certainly didn't talk about that in the State Department. It wasn't a thing until much, much later. And but in writing the book, which you have to start examining your life and who was influential and all those things, I realized that I did have mentors. We just didn't call it that, and I didn't always understand the invisible hand that was helping me with my career and everything else. But I will give you one example, which is perhaps a little bit off topic. But Somalia was a very, very challenging post for me, and it was far, far away from any place. It was, before the days of internet, and I didn't have a phone, and I called home 2 or 3 times in a year and a half, and it was just very, very far away, and there were no mentors there, and in fact, my leadership was not the best. And so I was going to quit the Foreign Service after Somalia, and I was going to. So I looked around, and I decided I was going to go to London, work in the visa mill there, and because London, they speak English there, and I thought I could maybe interview outside of the Foreign Service, or I could take quick trips to New York, which is where I had come from, and I could do interviews there as well. So when I got to London, the first thing that happened was they sent me to Moscow for a little bit over a month. Actually, no, the first thing that happened is I worked a presidential visit, which is very eye-opening. I mean, I did the motorcade, but it also kind of, I learned skills and it put me on the map. And as a result of that, I was asked to interview when I got back from Moscow. I was asked to interview to work for the ambassador as a staff assistant. And that is a very low-level job, very low level. But I wanted to take it because I wanted to see, what does the ambassador do in a place like London where there is this special relationship with the British. And what I found was that I worked for 3 men. The Ronald Reagan appointee, a career civil servant who was the interim head of the embassy until President Bush nominated his appointee. And they all looked out for me. They were 3 very different men with very different ways of approaching things. But what it made me realize, as I looked up to them and saw them making decisions, saw them relating to people and stuff, is that they were all effective and they were completely different. And that, in those days, women dressed like little men. We had boxy suits. We had these little faux ties. What I realized was that I could be myself and I could still be effective. I didn't have to pretend to be a man. I didn't have to pretend to be something else. And I could forge my own path, trying to take the best of all 3 of these men and others that I met along the way.
It's interesting to hear that you realized that more upon reflection than at the time.
Yes.
Right? So, fascinating. All right. I wonder if you would take a little time to talk to us about the situation in Ukraine.
Yeah.
I know that a lot of people here are very interested in what you think about the situation, what you predict might happen, not just in the short term, but maybe in the long term. Let's look out a decade. What might you see developing as a result of the situation we're in now? And what kind of stuff do we need to know that we don't know? So we're hearing things through the press every day. Maybe there are things that we should be looking for, listening for, things that we don't know about that we ought to be alert to as we continue to observe this situation from a distance.
Yeah. So I would say that I am bullish on Ukraine. I think that long term, and I am hoping that 10 years is long term. I think long term Ukraine is going to be victorious. I don't see any other path. And even if by some strange twist of faith, Russia is militarily victorious, which all of my military colleagues tell me is not possible. I mean, they can do this war of attrition, but actually vanquish Ukraine, not really possible. But even just say they did that, there will be a resistance. The Ukrainians will resist. I think, you know, everybody in this room has seen enough of what the Ukrainian people are made of to understand that. But I think that what will happen is that there will be, I mean, the war will continue. I think the fighting war will continue for some time. I'm hoping at some point there is an opportunity for negotiations, but it has to be on Ukrainian terms. Because sometimes what we forget in the United States is that in 2014, 2015, the French and the Germans, the Russians and the Ukrainians came together in something called the Normandy Process and negotiated ceasefires and certain conditions in two documents called the Minsk Agreements. And Russia never abided by any of it, including the ceasefire part of it. And you know, Ukraine had agreed under some pressure to sign these documents. So you know, fast forward to 2022, when the last time they were pressured by the internationals to sign a peace document because people were dying, and that is not to be taken lightly by anybody, and the Ukrainians certainly don't. You know, it didn't actually lead to a lasting peace. It was a ceasefire more in name than anything else, because, you know, for all those years from 2014 on, 2 or 3 people died every week. Ukrainians died every week, and I guess Russians as well. You know, some of them civilians, some of them soldiers. That is not a peace. It isn't even really a ceasefire. And so the Ukrainians remember that. And so they want to make sure that any kind of negotiation is on their term and that it is lasting, that it isn't just an 8-year hiatus for Russia to rebuild its strength and come back for more. But the other thing that has happened is when Bucha was liberated on March 30th, about a month after the war started, and the Ukrainians saw what the Russians had perpetrated there. The deaths of civilians, the tortures, the rapes, the mutilations, children being sent, not just children, but children being kidnapped and sent to Russia to be adopted by Russian families. They will never know they're Ukrainian. They will never know the Ukrainian language. They will never know that they have families in Ukraine that love them. I mean, when the Ukrainian people saw that, they realized that, you know, all of the talk and the writings of Putin, that we needed to take that at face value, that he really did believe that there is no Ukraine, that there are no Ukrainian people, and he really did want to wipe them off the face of the earth. And so for the Ukrainians, this is an existential war. And so it has to be on Ukrainian terms when they are ready, when they see that the facts on the ground, in other words, the territory that they control, is working to their advantage. It needs to be on their terms. But it doesn't mean that we are a disinterested party, because we are not. I mean, Ukrainians have the agency, and I was just there in September, and you know, this is a country, this is a people that is completely mobilized. And they are mobilized because they know why they are fighting. They are fighting for their family, they are fighting for their freedom. And they were, you know, courageous, as we've all seen. They were committed, and they were confident that they were going to win. And we've seen, you know, the waves of victories that have come since mid-September. But it doesn't mean it's easy. And you know, the price that the Ukrainian people pay is very high. And as the Russians have realized that they cannot win militarily, they are attacking the population and the civilian infrastructure. And Ukrainians are now in for a cold and dark and miserable winter. And yet they are not giving up. You know, the warming stations that have been established all over Ukraine are called invincibility centers. I mean, if that doesn't give you a peek into the Ukrainian soul, I don't know what does. And you know, we were talking last night about the humor that Ukrainians use to deflect some of these things, and I'll just tell you one joke. You know, with the blackouts and the lack of electricity, Putin, a man who seems to have made it his mission to kill every Ukrainian that's out there, is now going to be responsible for the birth of hundreds, if not thousands, of Ukrainian babies single-handedly. So so this is the tenor of the humor, and it gets blacker. But I think the Ukrainian people are all in. They are completely committed. But as I said, we have a stake in this too, and we are helping Ukraine because it is a feisty country that was, set upon by an aggressor state for no good reason. But we are helping Ukraine also, and most importantly, because it is in our national security interests. We are not doing this because we're nice people. We're doing it because it's in our interests. It is in our interests to stop Russia in Ukraine, to help the Ukrainians stop Russia there, than to allow Putin to roll right over Ukraine and continue on as he has said he wants to do. And so I think that is perhaps the most important thing that we need to understand, that Putin and Russia are very ambitious, very aggressive, and we are going to have to deal with that state one way or the other. And it is better for the United States to help Ukraine defeat Russia in Ukraine.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time today. Thanks for these insights. It's been a real pleasure to hear you today and to have you with us. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
Ambassador.
Thanks for
Thank you.
And now for a few closing words.
To give back, have an impact, make integrity the center of your professional lives, be able to look at yourself in the mirror
That's very important.
and forge your own path.
Yeah.
Thank you for those lessons. Thank you for reminding us of the importance. Okay. Madam Ambassador, thank you so much for being with us and spending your time. This has been a great privilege for us to have you here.
Thank
I also want to take a moment to thank the Douglas family again, and Senator Douglas, and all of you for being here with us today, and Robin and the IGPA staff for putting together this event. And have a good afternoon and happy holidays.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Thanks so much. Thank you very much.
We're at the lunch hour, and we're so grateful to have box lunches for you just outside. Ambassador, I didn't have a chance to ask you, but with some grace, I hope that I could ask our students to come forward and have pictures with you.
Oh, of course, that'd be great.
Before we grab lunch. And otherwise, I just want to thank everybody for being with us for such an inspiring set of remarks and conversation. And thank you, Gretchen.
Yeah.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Real pleasure.
Thank you.